first of all, what an amazing conference this is. I just found out about this a few months ago, and I'm so glad I did. This is an amazing facility, an amazing event, so I just want to start with that. This session itself is really just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to introduce some of the basic concept of flipped learning. Some of you may have some background in it already. This afternoon, there's going to be a workshop for people that want to dive in and start making the videos or start creating their own flipped lessons. Before I even introduce myself, does anyone want to give it a shot at how to define a flipped classroom or flipped learning? Does anyone have any background in it? Okay. Yeah.
It's where the kids take home what you would normally do in your lesson here in a 10-minute video instead of a 40-minute lesson. Yep. And then when they get back in the classroom, they're doing the homework that they were on and they kind of struggle through at home.
Okay. Good. So Cheryl mentioned that you take some of your direct instruction, like say a typical 40-minute lecture, or however long you lecture, create a short instructional video, shift it to homework, and then in class you free up some time. That is, I would say, the traditional definition of flipped learning. But what I think is so exciting is that this is evolving at a rapid pace. And there are so many different definitions of what a flipped classroom can be. And that's what I'm going to do today, is show you some of the different types. Okay? Anyone else? A slightly different definition? Yep. What do you think?
I like to kind of compare it to almost like a college experience where you have students who are going out and getting background knowledge they need to come into class. Mm-hmm. Everybody starts on that same level area, and then you build on it from there. So a lot of times I give the kids, go research this concept using videos or using a specific website that I gave them. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Mark's point, having them do the background research and gain that context before class, and then you grapple with higher order things in class. That's another great way to think of it. Yep.
For me, it's also extending the conversation, the discussion of class to outside of the classroom.
Yes.
Which is more, I guess, blended learning than flipped learning. It's,
yep.
being able to respond to a kid's comment at 1 in the morning if I'm awake at that time, and
okay.
Have
good.
everybody be able to access it at 1 in the morning if they're awake at that time.
Good. So extending the learning beyond the classroom.
Yeah.
Good. And a lot of people say when you're implementing technology, it should do one of three things. It should engage, enhance, and extend the learning. Okay. So I think in a way this does all three of those. But okay. So introduction. My experiences with flipped learning a few years ago. Through my grad program at Columbia, I started to research different blended learning models, and I came across the flipped learning concept. You may be familiar with John Bergman and Aaron Sams. They wrote, at this point, the only book on it, and I contacted them, started to do some research, tried it in my classroom. I started with what's called Flipped 101, kind of the traditional flip, and then I tried to advance it into a few different other areas. Recently, I teamed up with a few other people to author some chapters for books coming out, which I'll mention at the end. But I think so far I'm so glad I've done it. It's been an unbelievable experience. Also, contact information. If you type that in, that's the presentation, that bit.ly link. I'll also show it again at the end. The other contact information at the bottom on Twitter, also put that up. This is also being recorded, so if you miss something, I'll share the video with you. Okay, I'm a social studies teacher, a history teacher. This is my introduction to ed tech through the ages. You guys tell me what they're talking about. So which technology are they describing in these quotes? It was there that I first witnessed the processes of analytical and inductive teaching. I felt the quickening influence of kindness in a teacher, and this technology stimulates students to self-dependence and furnishes a splendid opportunity for that democratic give and take which he must meet in the real life. It was close. What are they talking about? What technology do you think they're describing here? This is historic now. Close. It was from the 1840s, those quotes, and they were describing the blackboard. They were describing the blackboard. Those are real quotes. So, clearly, that did not fulfill all the promises that it had as a blackboard. It didn't end there. Look at this. The phonograph, it can't go out of date. Okay, that's a real ad. All right, so a couple different promises. Starting in 1922, Edison The motion picture is destined to revolutionize our educational system and will supplant textbooks. We won't need textbooks anymore. He wrote that in 1922. This is the best part. We will obtain 100% efficiency in learning with movies. That did not happen. 1945, the radio. Radio receiver. We will have classrooms and textbooks of the air. Okay. 84, the computer will blow up the school. We won't have schools anymore. It is incompatible with the presence of the computer. Now, you may kind of be on something. He's 30 years ahead, but I think this is where we're finally starting to realize maybe they're onto something. No, the blackboard didn't revolutionize everything, but I think some of these new instructional technologies may be getting there. Okay, so clearly technological innovations do not guarantee improvement. However, they can be used to change the nature of your teaching. And that's what I want to talk about with flipped learning today. Now, what is the difference between these two classrooms? 1950s. Now, what's the difference there? What are some of the big 1950s? Now, what are some of the big differences you see? Just right off the bat. Yep. Correct. Not everybody is physically there. They're in another space entirely, virtually, they're connected. Okay, what else? Think from a tech standpoint.
PowerPoint, but also means the presentation was prepared ahead of time rather than at.
Correct. You didn't need a blackboard. You have your presentation ahead of time. It looks like a smart board, maybe a smart board. We have video conferencing. But the point I'm trying to make is, what are the similarities? That's what I'm more concerned with. 1950s now, what are the similarities? They're all in a row. There's still a teacher. What type of pedagogical strategies is he using? Lecture, direct instruction. Nothing has changed, except we have new engaging, I guess not even engaging, fancy technology. And more people can view your direct instruction. And I think that's a problem. That's not good. Okay, if you're just using the same technology to propagate the same tired pedagogical approach, you're not doing anything much better, in my opinion. So, we have these, what are those called? Google, what are those called? Laptops, the Google laptops. Chromebooks. We have like Socrative, the rapid response on phones. We have all this crazy technology, but we still rely too much on large group direct instruction. Kind of ironic, that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, but large group direct instruction is not always the best way to go. That smart board, I think some of the presenters have said it today. 90% of the time I see it's the teacher using it, not the students. Okay, so we're still relying too much on direct instruction. So how do we fundamentally change the nature of student learning? There are a few things that I focus particularly on. Other educators might focus on different things, but I want to create an environment that's inquiry-based, that's engaging, that's relevant, and the last one, which I think is most important, it's personalized. We are in an era of standardization, in education at least. The world is in an era of personalization. Okay, so that's where we need to move education. Not the standardization, but the personalization. That's what this is hopefully going to help. All right, we have approaches throughout the world right now, all these different ways to teach. The one that we're going to focus on today is flipped learning. Notice that the language is a little different. How did you first hear about this? What was it called? Was it flipped learning? Flipped classroom. That's not just semantics. That's not an accident. A lot of people in this community are using the word flipped learning now. We want to move away from this concept of the classroom space alone or just videos. We want to move away from that. We want to flip the learning. And I'll explain what that means a little bit more in a second. Here are some misconceptions. And almost everybody I talk to that has first heard of flipped learning, these are the things that they say if they have any concerns with it. They say it doesn't have any structure. Okay, kids maybe are viewing the video or not viewing it. That's the first question I get is, what if the kids don't view the video? That's a good question. Okay, so I think there's no structure to it. They say it isolates students, that they're not working together. They say it's an online course, which it's not. It's more of a blended environment. And they say it requires excessive staring at screens. And what I thought was great about the session in here yesterday with Lee Sheldon, I believe his name was, he said that you can have story and gamification without a screen at all. Okay, and some people flip their classroom and they don't even use a lot of tech. Okay, it's really the mindset that's different. Okay, so those are some of the common misconceptions that I'll address through this presentation. The worst misconception that I hear over and over again that makes me cringe. They say that flipped learning reduces the value of the teacher. I think if you distort the flipped class model, destroy the model, then yes, flipped learning or flipped classrooms can reduce the value. For instance, some schools, I think it was maybe Texas, they said, oh, we're flipping our class. I saw 2 teachers, like 75 kids on computers, and the teacher just kind of wandered around. That is not a flipped classroom. Okay, that is not flipped learning. Okay, and that's what I hate when people try to use that definition for flipped learning. That's not what it is. This is a great quote by Paul Anderson. He did a TEDx talk, which I linked later in the presentation. Here's his quote. He says, the teacher is the most important part of the functioning classroom. I truly believe that. Teacher implies learning, and if you're not getting learning, you're not a teacher, you're a talker. Okay, you have the people who say, oh, I taught it. They just didn't learn it. You didn't teach it if they didn't learn it. You just talked. Okay, so that's one of the big ideas that we're trying to promote here. And then a great resource that just came out about a month or 2 ago. A white paper, a literature review, released by the Flipped Learning Network, doing a lot of research on this. And they say that flipped learning has even more importance on the teacher than ever, because they have to determine which direct instruction they're going to shift into the private learning space, and then how you're going to maximize the time you spend with them in class. That actually takes a lot more skill and work than just getting up and delivering a lecture. So in a way, you are making it more of a professional occupation than otherwise. Okay, so enough introduction. What is it? Okay, what is flipped learning? What I'd like to do is just start by showing you a clip from Aaron Sams. Is anyone familiar with any of Aaron's work? Okay, he's a teacher out in Colorado. Actually, I think he's in a new position now, but this is an example of what his flipped class looked like.
I'm Aaron Sams. We're here in Woodland Park, Colorado at Woodland Park High School. Flipped learning, I think, on a really basic level is taking what has traditionally been given in a lecture in terms of direct instruction and shifting that out of the class time, and then using that recuperated time more wisely, more valuably to really meet the individual learning needs of students. The way I got started doing this is I just started recording my lessons live for my students who were missing class and posting those online for them as a resource. They get to access it when they want to, and that could be at 10 o'clock at night, it could be 6 o'clock in the morning, it could be on the bus to the soccer game. They have control of that. Students would watch those before they came to class, and then class time was work time, engaging in some higher order thinking, and so we didn't have to use our class time for direct instruction. We could shift that out of the class.
There's a site where we go to and we watch our podcast, and it has like all the units.
And during the class period, we're doing labs and applying the skills that we learned at home.
I wish more people would do the flipped classroom. I think it definitely works for every speed of learner.
If a student is a fast learner, they can go through the material as quickly as they want. The slower learners, the students who struggle, they have control of the rate at which they learn the material. So they can pause the teacher, they can rewind the teacher, they can view it multiple times if they need to. If everyone's not doing the same thing at the same time on the same day, my class looks a little chaotic. It looks like a three-ring circus of learning is what I call it. I also give them the option, if they don't want to take my test, to demonstrate their understanding in some other way. So I have students making video games, writing comic books, creating art projects. So yeah, the sky's the limit. Whatever they want to do, as long as they can prove to me that they get it, that they're learning, that they understand these things, and it's good enough for me. There's a school in Michigan that has adopted this instructional model for all of their core classes. What they're seeing there is that their failure rates have gone from like in the 40% down to single digits. So that's pretty remarkable there. One of the concerns that educators are really wrestling with these days is the fact that we are preparing our students for jobs that don't exist yet. And I really see flipped learning as a tool that teachers can leverage to help students learn to think, learn to access information when they need it, and to be able to process it in a meaningful way. So I might not be training my kids for a specific job, but I'm giving them the tools, the ability to think in the process and the problem solve that they will need for whatever they end up doing.
All right, so what is the best use of your face-to-face class time? That's John Bergman's quote from Flip Your Classroom. That was the first and only book today that's out on it. So that's important. Okay. Once you flip, then what? And I get emails all the time, particularly from history teachers, because us history teachers, we love our lecture. Okay, so if I don't lecture in class, what do I do? And I say, well, if you're asking that question, you should probably really rethink how you teach, because then it shows there's some big gaps in what you're doing, okay, if all you're doing is lecturing. All right, this came out, again, a month or two ago. It's called The 4 Pillars of Flip. John, Aaron, a couple other people that worked with the Flip Learning Network came up with this. It's actually part of an online course offered through the Flip Learning Network in Pearson, which means I'm a little limited in how much I can talk about it. These are the 4 pillars, and they'll help you get a better grasp of what flipping actually means. All right, the first is flexible environments. Okay, that, yes, the time shifting of video, but also you're flexible in your class time. The learning culture. Okay, there's a shift, there's a flip in the learning culture from teacher-centered to student-centered. Intentional content, you will very carefully evaluate any direct instruction or resources that you provide your students. And then lastly, is professional educators. The community, the Flip Learning community is unbelievable. Okay, and it's easy to access online through social media and also through more specific sessions like you have today or the Flip Learning Conference. I'm going to go through each one of these individually. First, flexible environments. Think about your learning space. Once you take your lecture out of the classroom, you have a world of opportunities. You don't need to have everyone facing the front. You don't need a front. Something that John Bergman mentions a lot of time is it would be nice if kids walked into the classroom and they asked the question, where's the front of the room? That would be a great question to get from your kids, because then it shows that you are no longer relying on a front group-led direct instruction class. A few things to keep in mind is where are they going to work independently, where are they going to work in groups, where are they going to be evaluated by the teacher, and where are they going to get direct instruction. Here's something that I picked up from an ISTE article. I think it was a school in Australia, and they studied Aboriginal learning practices going all the way back. And they said some of the first ways people started to learn was they would go to the fireside, and they would listen to the elders, and that would be like the direct instruction. The elders impart their wisdom. They would have the watering hole where they would meet and they would collaborate and they would talk about things. Then they had the caves where they thought in solitude, where they got to decompress and think about their day. And they said, wow, what a great model this is. Why did we stop doing this? Okay, so they actually call it the campfire, the cave, and the watering hole. And they have it with elementary students. They actually have the different designated parts of the school. I would be a little leery of that with high schoolers because they might have a different definition of watering hole. They might think of, oh, I can drink beer in class now. But the whole point is that you have designated areas for these different types of learning. The other thing is autonomy. When you have flexible environments, you're giving them control, you're giving them power. That is scary. Not all kids can use this correctly, all this freedom to learn. However, my personal opinion is that that's something we need to teach them. That's just as important a life skill, this self-regulated learning, than anything else they would learn about, say, Alexander the Great. Okay, that's content as part of my course, but I would rather have them have autonomy and learn how to learn when and where is applicable. Okay? Assessments are always going to be different in a flipped classroom as well. One thing that's perfect is you can do a lot more informal, one-on-one formative assessments. You'll have the time to circulate, to discuss with your students, and it may not be in a grade book, okay, but you'll be able to assess and gauge their learning on the fly. The assessment system I use is SBG, or standard-based grading. Has anyone tried that? Okay, it's a kind of a simple concept. You just have your standards or objectives for your unit, and instead of having assignment 1 in your grade book, you just say standard 1. And you have a grade, are they proficient in standard 1? And you move through that way. So and it's more of a self-paced system, but that's the way I do it. There's a million other ways to do it, but you're flexible with your assessments. The L, okay, the flipped, is the learning culture. And a lot of people have a new definition of saying flipping isn't flipping your direct instruction, you're flipping the ownership of learning. Okay, it's not the teacher that owns the learning, that imparting their wisdom, the students are learning. And most class time is not spent on direct instruction. Instead, class time is spent with students exploring the topic in depth in meaningful learning context to them. What does the teacher do? Okay, again, I asked that, what do you do in class if you're not doing direct instruction? I'm constantly walking around, gauging their understanding, giving small-scale direct instruction if they need it, modeling skills, just having a conversation with a student. Okay, when I did lecture-heavy teaching, which I did for my first 5 years, I didn't have a lot of time to even talk with the students, unless they played sports or after-school stuff that I did. So now I can actually talk with the students. Okay, and that is an actual valuable part of the class that people underestimate. John and Aaron in their book say, flipped learning is not about flipping the when and where. It's about flipping attention away from you and towards the learner. And again, this isn't a bad thing. A lot of people think if the attention's not on you every second of every class, then you're not doing your job. That's not true. Okay, and that's why if an administrator walks in on your flipped class, their little checklist may not align. Are all students looking at the teacher? That doesn't matter. How does that have to do with learning? It doesn't. Okay, them sitting and being quiet, that's not necessarily a good thing. Maybe sitting there sleeping, that's not good. Okay, so active, engaged learning, that's more important than just having order and structure. Okay, intentional content, that's the I. This is where the videos come in. And the way I think about it is this. You're shifting your direct instruction online. It doesn't have to be a lecture. You could be modeling a skill. There's a few different ways you can do that I'll talk about in a few slides. If you think it's effective, don't just make a lecture for the sake of making a lecture and putting it online. Only use it if it's necessary. Okay, this is a screenshot from a lecture I gave on modern America. I thought that they needed some context. It's scary to think that my students can't remember 9/11. They don't. Raise your hand if you remember 9/11. Not one student in my class did. These are 10th graders. That's crazy that I'm already teaching 9/11 as a lecture. But anyway, I feel like that's a valuable direct instruction piece, so I made a video of it. Beyond that, though, you don't have to make every single thing. You can find tools and simulations and awesome stuff out there. Sometimes I wish I was a science or math teacher. There's so much simulations out there that you can use. For instance, this is one, I think, on physics. This is a simulation that I use in my social studies classes called iCivics. Great, and then Minecraft, of course. You can start embedding games and simulations into your class time instead of lecturing. So again, it frees up some time for you to experiment with these things. Now, can't really consider the value of it, because not everything is taught best versus lecture. Okay, and you guys know that, but here's an example. Driving. You don't teach driving just through lectures and say, here are the keys. Or if you're in a state that does, it's really dumb. Okay, they need to have steps and progress. You have to have driving school and people helping you out, and they have to practice before they do it. So not everything is best taught via lecture. Consider that. I stopped lecturing entirely in class about these topics, but I also realized I don't have to put a lot of stuff on video because a lot of my lectures weren't necessary. Or if kids already knew them, why teach it? Okay, so a lot of times I would have them do an activity first before I showed them the lecture. If they all got it right, you don't have to watch the lecture. There's no point. Okay, so it saves a lot of time. All right, you can use other people's videos. For instance, Crash Course World History, something I use with my AP kids because he goes 100 miles an hour. Actually, his name's John Green. He's an author, but he also does this. You can use them, but I suggest creating your own. If you create your own, in a way, it's kind of like John Bergman refers to it as like a social contract with your students. In a way, they want you to be the person giving the direct instruction sometimes, not just some random guy from the internet. Okay, so it does create a better relationship with your students when they see you there. Some get freaked out by it. Okay, and actually one parent came up to me during parents' night. He's like, yeah, I heard your voice in my student's room the other day. And I was like, whoa, okay. It was just a video lecture, but it freaks some people out to see your teacher on the screen. Some people don't use the video part of it. You can just screencast with your voice. Okay, but I would suggest trying to make some of your own. And then the professional part, professional educators, that's the P. Professional educators are reflective in their practice. They connect with each other. Okay, that's a big part of this is connecting. Most of what I learned about flipped learning was from other people in the flipped learning community. Accept criticism. Okay, right now I may have criticized some of the practices that you do right now. I'm not saying that this is the perfect way, but consider it. Okay, people have criticized my practices. I basically took what I did the first 4 years of teaching, threw it out the window. I said, all right, well, I was doing a good job, I thought, but I want to try something different. Okay, so you have to be able to accept some constructive criticism. And also tolerate controlled classroom chaos. Again, this is the hardest part for me because, I'm still a young teacher, but I was still taught control is key. You know, your first 4 years, You keep your job by keeping classroom management. And that's what I was taught over and over in grad school down at Vassar, not Vassar, undergrad at Vassar. But then when I got to my grad classes, they said, well, that's not the most important thing. It's not just about classroom management. It's about learning. Okay, so that should be your key. So there will be a little bit more chaos, but you have to be able to accept that. Now, joining the community of reflective educators. A couple ways to do that. There's a NING. I guess that word's kind of not even in use anymore, but it's a social network for teachers. It's got 13,000 teachers that are flipping their classrooms around the country. Okay, and that link in the PowerPoint, which I'll share with you guys again at the end, if you just look up Flip Learning Network NING, you can join that. Also, if you're on Twitter, this is how I connect mostly. Twitter is the most untapped resource for educators. People have this stigma of Twitter that it's just about people posting about their cats. Well, my answer to them is don't follow people who post about your cats. You don't have to follow them. Follow people who you want to listen to or that you want to connect with. Okay, and a lot of times they'll follow you back, and then you create this whole little learning community. The hashtag, I don't know if you're familiar with hashtags, but that's just a way to search for different topics. If you just search flip class hashtag, there's probably going to be 10 tweets in the next minute on just flip class. Okay, so people are constantly talking about this. All right, so different ways that you can do it. The first is Flipped 101, which is what Cheryl mentioned. Ways that you can do it. The first is Flipped 101, which is what Cheryl mentioned at the beginning. You take your lectures, you put them online. Very simple. Archive your direct instruction. That's how I started. So I start my year. We talk about ancient Greece. We have our lectures. That's a good way to start, too. You start here. You can make them interactive, too, so I have like a hotspot thing where they click on the video and it goes to different places. But that's really just the whole concept of shifting direct instruction online. What I do now, or what I did last year at least, is what's called flipped mastery. And that takes the mastery model, which is still based in direct instruction, but I have a standard-based grading system where I have my objectives, I have the learning task, I'll provide them with resources to do the learning task, I'll give them a score. Usually it's 0 to 4. I use a Marzano scale of standard-based grading, 4 being proficient, approaching, and all that. And then I convert it to 0 to 100 because that's what our district uses. You can't put a 4 on a report card. Okay, so I convert it over, but this is how I set mine up. I also have different learning goals. Okay, so this is just a screenshot. I didn't have one on there, but I have 4 different learning goals. This is where I'm thinking the gamification might work, and I can like level it. But I'll modify it for certain students that say, all right, maybe if you just do these 2 objectives, that counts for that learning goal. And I'll create videos or flipped instruction videos tagged to each one of these. So I might say, okay, well, propaganda video, that will help you with this assignment. But you see, I didn't just say, do the propaganda video, then do this assignment. It's once you get to this assignment, you can use the propaganda video. I don't even assign them for homework. They watch their videos when they're ready. So in a way, I actually do a more self-paced class. They progress through this at their pace. And my direct instruction is provided to them when they need it, if they need it. If they could do this without my video, do it. Okay, but you'd have to make sure you're proficient. If you say, I'm not going to watch your video, Mr. Driscoll, I'm just going to do the assignment and it comes out like crap, I'm sorry, you might want to go back and watch my video. Okay, but really the video is a tool for them to learn, not something that's required necessarily for homework. And then I actually make them progressively more difficult. So for instance, analyzing and evaluating, kind of working your way up blooms. But I'm even rethinking that myself. I may not want to keep doing that necessarily. And this is an awesome model that just came out. Ramsey Musalam's an excellent educator out in San Francisco. He did the keynote at the Flip Learning Conference this year. He's an inquiry-based guy, constructivist learning. He thinks the GI model is crap. He's not a Skinner fan. So he developed the Explore, Flip, Apply. And he's big on inquiry hooks, getting kids engaged and motivated before you even show them a video. He said, have them solve some type of problem in an explore phase, then regroup. If they need help, show them a flip video. If they don't, move on. Okay, again, if they get it, you don't have to go back. Then they apply what they learned. Okay, so it's an explore, flip, apply. That's a more constructivist model. I think that's a really great way to do it. What's cool about this too, and he had a great way to explain it, he said blooms, everyone thinks that as you move up blooms to like the higher order thinking, it should be harder. He said you don't have to do that. You can have different levels of rigor at different parts of blooms. So say you have a create, which is up top. He'll start with a create, but it will be a low rigor create, something that they could handle. Then he will go down and do maybe a low level understanding, bump it up to a high level understanding, because there can be very hard stuff to understand. People say, oh, it's the bottom of Bloom's, understanding is important. Of course it is. Maybe some very hard things to understand. Then he'll move back up in the apply phase to the high rigor create. So it's almost like a U. He starts at the top of Bloom's, works his way back down, then he goes back up. I think that's an awesome model. I want to try that. I just haven't done it yet. Okay, so why should you do it? Just really quickly, just to review some of the different reasons. One, I think that you will have more time in your class to build relationships with your students. Work individually with them one-on-one. That's the biggest advantage to this model. Second, you archived your direct instruction for remediation and review. Students can go back and review it before tests, before quizzes, exams, and other courses. Or kids that need to watch it twice, 3 times. I had students in my class when I first moved to Putnam, reading levels 2 to 10 in one classroom. Me giving a lecture on ancient Greece to people who read at second grade level and 10 doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. So if I make an instructional video, the kids that are reading quickly just breeze right through it. Other kids may take 2 periods to do it. That's fine, but they do it at their own pace. Students are more responsible for their learning. I mentioned that. It's self-regulated, and you have to teach that. You have to scaffold. I have a few different strategies I use. I need to get better at it myself. But they're not just going to automatically walk in and start doing this perfectly. You're going to have to prod them. You're going to help them. They can't just talk about prom for 45 minutes. You have to start working. So you're going to have to prod and give some instruction or get them back on track. It increases student-to-student interactions. You create learning environments where they're helping each other. I love the concept of peer instruction. I'm going off on tangents here, but one guy has a consulting slip that he gives out to kids, and he says if you help somebody else, okay, and you can pay them to help you with a consulting slip, and then if you collect the most consulting slips, you get a prize. So there's a prize for the student who helps the most kids in class, which I think is a really cool model. I don't know how it would work in practice, but you can try that stuff in your flipped classroom. You can differentiate instruction at a greater level, like that objectives grid I showed you. You could create a choice menu board. Okay, you guys may be familiar with that, where you have the different types of learners and the different types of assignments. Tag those to different objectives and differentiate. They're also used to learning this way. They're more used to learning through a quick video than sitting in a large lecture hall. Okay, we might be more used to it because that's how we grew up. They didn't grow up that way. Okay? It also is a stepping stone towards inquiry. This is where I want to go. My videos that I'm working on next week will be inquiry videos. I will not give one answer to anything in the video. It will be purely inquiry to try to get them to think, to pose questions, pose problems, and start with that. So it can be a stepping stone towards inquiry. You don't have to use a video just to answer a question. It can be to pose a question. And then this last part is extremely important, personalization. In the chapter I wrote for John's book, I call it democratization, but it's the same concept. That you open up the classroom, you personalize it, you cater to their needs. You don't just have the standardized structure that everyone has to do. And that's important because that's the world we live in. We live in a personalized world, not a standardized world. Okay, so we should model our classroom that way. Okay, implementation, I have 0 time to go through this. That's what the workshop's for, but I'll quickly go through the main parts of it. If you want to start, what is the purpose of your video? These are a couple that I thought of. There are more. You have the intro. You can do a lecture. You can model skills. A AP or a review. I have samples there you can click on when you watch the presentation. Differentiate. Technology tutorials. I have a video on how to make a screencast for my kids because they create their own. Assignment instructions, if you don't want to keep saying it over and over again. Address misconceptions, inquiry hooks. The possibilities are limitless. Don't just think it's just a lecture. You can use instructional video for anything. And then another easy way to start is if you say something over and over and over again in class, that might be a good place to start. Start with that. And then say, go watch the video. It's not bothering me, go watch the video. No, don't say that. But you're thinking that, but it's there. Have a fact library, frequently asked question library. Okay, I say I'm teaching AP DBQ writing. I say the same thing over and over and over again. Then I just finally made an AP DBQ video. Say, oh, just review minutes 3 to 5 in the video. All right, so you got to record what you're doing. A couple options there. You publish your video. Those are another few options. Then you share it. Okay, so those are the 3 main steps. Again, you record it, publish it, share it. Those are the main steps. Now you have your video. How do you know it worked? Okay, you obviously have to have some type of assessment tool with it. I actually use handwritten notes plus a Google form. Okay, so I have the old school, take notes on the video, I look at it, and then I have a Google form attached to each one that they submit into a spreadsheet. Fluebrew is an awesome script that grades it for you, which is kind of cool if it's multiple choice. And then, of course, you can have an in-class check if you want. Okay, you can always do that as well. Now, where do we move from here? That's where I'm going to kind of close up. We got to move away from this. You need to move away from teacher use of technology for content delivery. It's got to move beyond that. Yes, we have fancy whiteboards and projectors, but if all you're doing is delivering content with it, that's not the best use of technology. We have to have student use to solve problems in inquiry-based learning environments. That's what we need to move towards. Okay, so that's the main thing that bouncing around in my head. That's what I want in my class. I don't want DI with technology. I want this. Gamification. That's why I love coming to this conference. I don't know a lot about gamification, but I think it's awesome. And I want to gamify my class in some ways, maybe level my mastery objectives grids or whatever. But that's something you can experiment with. I included something in the presentation if you want to watch TEDx Bozeman. This is an event where he talked about how he gamified his flipped classroom. He leveled it. He had the points by attrition, and it was really cool. But he started out with a flipped classroom. Then he moved towards gamification, like you can unlock this video at this level, and you move on, which I think is kind of cool. Okay. I created some videos of games we played in class. I have a blog post that discusses it more. This is the video that we created. But it's like March Madness basketball, which I love. And I made a March Madness review game for AP European History. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but the kids had a great time. And it gamified the class for about a week in our lead up to the exam. All right, some final thoughts. It's not just about technology. Yes, Google Glass is awesome, we think. So that's not the issue, though. It's not just the technology. It's not just the screencasting. It's not just all these different programs. And I'll give you an example from my house. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. Okay, so I don't get much sleep. But we're already, I feel like I need to take a step back with my kids with the technology. I got my son who's watching Dino Dan. At the same time, he's got my phone. I don't know how he got my phone. ABC Mouse is on the iPad laying on the floor somewhere. And I'm holding my daughter, and I'm walking around. I'm trying to pick up stuff, and he wants a different app on the iPad going, and the laptop, whatever. Information overload. And my daughter starts to cry a little bit. So then I start to think, all this tech stuff going around, my son's looking at all these crazy things. My daughter doesn't care about the iPad, or the computer, or the iPhone, or the MacBook. She just wanted me to pay attention to her. So I did. That's what she looks like. When I pay attention to her, she smiles at me, which is great. But the point is, it's about relationships. You're building relationships with your family, with your students, and that's what it's about. So you're using this technology, this classroom, not just to deliver instruction, but to build one-on-one relationships with your kids. And that's where I'd like to end it. Okay, so any questions? Yep. But, yeah, here it is.
What's your suggestion for the situation where teachers fairly active discovered that there's still a significant portion of the population that does not have access to a computer, or I was thinking families use one computer, and I frequently hear, no, I couldn't do that. My brother can turn people, and my mother doesn't have a computer. So then what?
Okay. 2 suggestions. 1, first day of school, ask the students, who checks Twitter or Facebook at night? See how many hands go up. Keep that in the back of your mind, because you may have some of those same students saying they don't have computer access. So right off the bat, you know they're lying. Okay. Second thing, if they aren't lying, if they really don't have access, I hope I didn't get the impression here that I make kids do technology at home. I don't. No. I don't. My kids, I live in I think a 60% reduced lunch or whatever. It's a high poverty school I teach in. We are not one-to-one. We have old crappy Dells in our computer lab. We are not high tech. I use what I can in class. Okay, so if they can't watch the video at home, or if they can't watch it on their phone, that's another thing. Do you have a smartphone? A lot of them do. Watch the video on your phone. If it's on YouTube, they can see it. So not many kids don't have phones now. So you're really limiting that population at this point. But if they still don't, use class resources. Maybe sign out a computer lab once a week for them to catch up with videos. Don't make as many videos. You can still flip your classroom without a ton of videos. Okay, so that's a situation that I'm in, is not everyone has access at home, but I still found a way to do it, and just make the most of your resources. And don't require it for homework. If kids have access issues, do not make videos a homework requirement. Okay, so hope that helps.
Also, you can, if you post them, if you don't have it as a daily assignment,
Yes.
you have it as like a weekly assignment.
Mhm.
Sometime during that week, sure,
Mhm.
they ought to be either at school or at
Yeah. Mhm.
That was a fantastic model. It was really great to see that. I guess my biggest thing that occurred to me though, as I was watching it, is when it was no longer about flipped classroom, it was about flipped learning. Flipped learning seems a lot like project-based learning, which is a lot like career-based learning, which is a lot like
Yes.
we've done the dance of basically putting a new name on, sort of the same kind of practices we want to embody. Is there value, I guess, the caution I've seen in adding another name to that mix?
So you're saying, why did we brand it as flipped learning? Is that your question?
Is it useful
Yeah.
to create another brand about
It's also Montessori.
Yeah. You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. And John and Aaron have caught this flack a lot. They said, what do you mean it's flipped learning? It's just blended learning, or it's just blah, 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 blah. Fine, I agree with your point. Does it have to be flipped? No, I could call it whatever. And some people say, well, isn't that just good teaching? Right? Aren't you just being a good teacher? Yes, but is that a problem? Right? If this can get us to that point, that's good. It got me there. Right? I thought I was doing a great job my first few years, but in hindsight, not so much. Once I got involved with the flipped class community, I started to think about these things. So if it gets people to start thinking about their practice, regardless of the branding and the issues and all that, I still think it's a good thing. And people want to say it's not flipped learning, I'm going to call it something else. You can call it whatever you want, but if you do it, that's awesome. Okay? Or if you come up with a different model, just do it. It's about helping the kids. Okay, so I understand, don't get too caught up in the flipped learning versus flipped classroom or whatever. If you just try these things, I think it's going to help. Okay, do you have anything else? Or?
Well, I guess my concern was that there seems so many options
Yeah.
that somebody can choose between, but really there's not that many out there. They're all sort of so similar. So
They are.
I'm worried about yet another option that somebody has to say, well, it's going to flip my classroom. It's being quick learning. It's not going to be close. It doesn't really matter. You're sort of doing the same thing. I don't know if there's a way
Yeah.
to connect those together.
I'll think about it. If I could find a way, that would be awesome, right? But yeah, as long as we're thinking, then that's the biggest thing. Yep. Yeah, people flip all the way down to first grade. Yeah. Yeah, I won't harp on this too much, but you're actually going to get the most resistance from both ends, the opposite ends of the spectrum. The kids in the middle, not so much, but the high-achieving kids have figured out the game of school. So once you change the game on them, they're going to be mad. So I had a lot of AP kids said, oh, I like the other way better. I'm used to getting my A's this way. I'm like, that's not the point. The point's not just getting your A. It's about learning something. Okay, so you're going to have problems with them and their parents, of course. So you have to really explain to the parents. Because I had one come up to me and say, oh, you're not teaching my kid anymore. You're just having him watch videos. Okay, so I had to explain, no, that's not what I'm doing. And then also, you're not going to be working with my kid anymore if they're just watching videos anymore. And then I'm like, oh my God, the whole point is that I can work with your kid more. Okay, and I try not to get too frustrated, but that's the whole point. So yes, you'll have problems on the lower end of the spectrum. And this is the point I make. Some people say, well, what if they just don't do it? And then I say, well, what's the difference between them not doing this versus them sleeping in the back of your class or disrupting your lecture? If anything else, then you can identify them quicker and do some interventions. You know right away the kids that aren't learning in this model, and you can target them quickly and try to help them. Okay, so that's the experience that I've had. Okay, just one more question. Okay.
Is everybody doing the same thing at the same time, or it's pretty much you have to hit A to Z by the end and you go at your own pace?
I self-pace my class. Some teachers don't. I like the self-paced model. Well, I'll bring it in for certain issues. So for instance, Sandy Hook happened. I teach in Connecticut. The next couple of days, we weren't doing this. Okay, we brought it back in and we had some discussions. So I'm not completely married to the idea of self-paced, but I do it. I think it works very well with the mastery model, self-paced. But you don't have to do it that way.
Then my second part is going, again, Deb, back to kind of what you were just saying. I have a teacher that puts everything on mine and gets to work self-paced. All I can picture is my district saying, again, we don't need you as a teacher, we'll put an aide in there, and now we just cut to this.
If an aide could do everything I just mentioned, they shouldn't be an aide. Okay, that's a lot of work in class, yeah.
Once we start having this, you'll have a library of stuff prepared.
Yep. But there's already it's called the internet. There's a library of everything out there. I understand what you're saying, but the direct instruction is and I know I'm not trying to engage with you. Yeah.
I do exactly what you're doing.
But I think if people say that, my response would be, there's information everywhere. You don't own it as a teacher. Your job is to help them learn something in class. That's your value. Okay, so it's not about what video is online. Okay, if you don't put a professional in the classroom to help the kids, they're not going to learn as well. Okay, and that's the point that I try to drive home. Okay, the last thing, and then we got to finish up here.
Well, for the personalization, I mean, I would never use the same videos again.
No, I agree,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah.
right
So
now.
I try to refer to
But in our
specific
district,
students.
the English teachers are getting a book this big, and you read a script.
That is terrible.
I mean,
Yeah.
why can't
Yeah.
anybody come in and read the script?
Yeah.
I see the other part of now I'm going to interact with you, and that's where the lip
Yeah.
learning comes from, not from the script.
Yeah.
But I think there's other people that are not in education that are making all the rules that,
And that's a problem. People that don't know anything about teaching are making the rules. So,
and changing it. So just,
okay. Gotcha. Because that wraps everything up. So my contact information is up here. If you want the link to the presentation, if you stick around for a second, I'll put that back up there. I'm on Twitter. I talk with anybody who wants to talk about flipped class. Email. The blog is Flipped History. I put everything that I reflect on up there, including the video of this conference will be up there on that website if you want to watch the video. My course learning management system, if you want to see that, my YouTube channel, and then a couple books that are coming out that I've contributed chapters to will be coming out too. So, all right, thank you, everyone. Bye.